Sarah checked her mirrors one more time. The rest stop was empty, completely empty, except for one thing. In the far corner, barely visible in the dying light, all 7 trucks were now facing her direction. Engines off, headlights dark, and in every single driver's seat, someone was sitting, watching, waiting. They drive through the veins of America. 2 million miles of asphalt and concrete connecting every corner of this country. Most of us never think about what happens on those roads after midnight, in those dead zones between cities, in the places where cell signals die and the only light comes from your own headlamps cutting through absolute darkness. But truck drivers know. They spend their lives out there, alone, sometimes for weeks at a time. And in that isolation, in those endless hours between destinations, some of them see things that don't fit into any rational framework. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 stories that were told to me directly by the drivers who experienced them. These aren't legends. These aren't stories passed around at truck stops until they've been worn smooth by repetition. These are first-hand accounts from people who saw something on the highway that fundamentally changed how they understand reality. I need to warn you, what you're about to hear isn't easy to dismiss. These events were witnessed by experienced professionals, people who've logged millions of miles, people who know the difference between exhaustion and genuine terror. And after you hear these stories, you might never look at an empty highway the same way again. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed true crime stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Michael Torres had been driving long haul for 19 years when this happened, September 2022. He was running a solo route from Dallas to Salt Lake City, a straight shot up through the empty heart of West Texas and into New Mexico. Michael was the methodical type, former military, everything by the book. He logged his hours precisely, maintained his truck like clockwork, and never took shortcuts, not the kind of person prone to flights of imagination. Which is why what happened on Highway 54, somewhere between Alamogordo and Carrizozo, is so difficult to explain away. It was 2:47 a.m. Michael remembers the exact time because he just logged it in his electronic system. He was making good time, ahead of schedule, and the highway was completely empty, no other vehicles for miles in either direction, just him and the darkness of the New Mexico desert. The radio had been cycling through static for the past hour. Out here, that was normal, too far from any major city to catch a signal. Michael had his own playlist ready to go, but he always gave the FM band one last scan before giving up. That's when he found it. A station. Coming through perfectly clear, no static, no interference, just there. Big band music, something from the 40s or 50s, the kind of thing his grandfather used to listen to. It had that old analog quality, warm, slightly compressed, recorded on equipment that didn't exist anymore. Michael almost changed it, almost, but there was something mesmerizing about finding any signal at all out here, let alone one this clear. He let it play. The song ended, a brief pause, then a voice came on, warm, professional, distinctly vintage announcer style. You're listening to KDRM, broadcasting on 104.7 FM. The time is now 2:52 a.m., and you're in for a special night of music here in the high desert. This next one goes out to all our drivers out there on the lonely roads. Stay safe, stay alert, and remember, you're never quite as alone as you think you are. Michael felt a small chill run down his spine. Weird thing to say, but radio DJs were weird sometimes, he'd heard stranger. The music started again, another big band number, Glenn Miller maybe, something his grandfather would have recognized. But then Michael noticed something that made him reach for his phone to check. KDRM, 104.7 FM. He pulled up his radio station app, the one that lists every station in every region. He typed in the frequency. No results. No station broadcasting on 104.7 in this area. In fact, no FM stations at all within a 100-mile radius. Michael looked at his radio display. The frequency was there, clear as day, 104.7 FM, signal strength, full bars. He told himself it was probably an unlisted station, some small operation that hadn't updated the databases. It happened. But something about that DJ's voice, about that sign-off, you're never quite as alone as you think you are. Another song played, then another, all vintage, all perfectly clear, and between each song the DJ came back with that same warm, professional voice. Still with us out there? Good, we like the company. Not many listeners tune in anymore. In fact, most nights, we only get one. Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He glanced at his radio, then back at the empty highway. You know what's interesting about this stretch of road, Highway 54, between mile markers 47 and 63? 16 miles of absolutely nothing. No exits, no services, no cell towers. Just darkness. And in that darkness, well, things have a way of happening. Michael felt his heartbeat accelerate. This was too specific, too targeted. July 1983, a truck driver named Raymond Beck disappeared on this exact stretch. Engines still running when they found his rig, coffee still warm in the cup holder. Raymond was gone, never found. March 1991, similar story. Driver named Patricia Yee, truck found pulled over, door open, Patricia nowhere to be seen. Search teams covered 50 square miles, nothing. The DJ's voice remained cheerful, upbeat, like he was sharing interesting local trivia. October 1998, December 2004, April 2011. Always this stretch, always between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m., always the same pattern. Trucks found, drivers gone. Michael grabbed his CB radio with one hand, eyes still on the road. Breaker 19, anyone on this channel? Does anyone copy? Static. Dead air. He tried his phone. No signal. Of course no signal. He was in the dead zone. The FM radio crackled back to life. We're still here, Michael. The DJ had used his name. Michael felt ice water flood his veins. His foot eased off the accelerator unconsciously. The truck began to slow down. Michael Torres, 19 years on the road, excellent safety record, currently hauling electronics equipment to Salt Lake City, estimated arrival time 11:30 a.m. tomorrow, that is, if you make it through the next 14 miles. How do you know my name? Michael said aloud, knowing it was pointless, knowing the radio couldn't hear him. But the DJ responded anyway. We know everyone who comes through here, Michael. We've been broadcasting for a long time, since before these roads had names, since before there were trucks to drive on them. We just adapted our format over the years, stayed relevant, stayed modern. Would you like to hear something special? Something we don't play for everyone? Michael watched in horror as the radio display began cycling through frequencies automatically. His hand hadn't touched it. The dial was moving by itself. Different stations, different voices, all talking at once. Help me, please, I don't know where. Been driving for hours, but the exit never comes. Something in the back of my trailer, something that shouldn't. Can't stop the truck, won't stop, the brakes aren't. The radio went dead, completely dead, not even static. Michael's speedometer read 45. He was slowing down without meaning to. His body was reacting to something his conscious mind hadn't fully processed yet. He forced himself to accelerate, 50, 55, 60. And then, cutting through the silence of the dead radio, a new sound emerged. Distant singing, children singing, coming from the speakers even though the radio was off. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Michael slapped the radio, hit the power button. Nothing changed. The singing continued. The temperature in the cab dropped. Michael could see his breath suddenly fogging in the air. The heating had been on. He hadn't touched the controls, but now it felt like a freezer. And then he saw them. In his peripheral vision, in the darkness beyond his headlight beams, shapes, moving parallel to his truck, keeping pace. Not animals, not vehicles, just shapes. Humanoid, running at impossible speeds, dozens of them, on both sides of the highway. When Michael tried to look directly at them, they weren't there, but in the corner of his eye, in that peripheral blind spot where your brain fills in details that might not be real, They were. We all fall down, we all fall down, we all fall down. Michael's headlights began to flicker, on, off, on, off. Each time they came back on, the shapes were closer. He could see more detail now in those fractional glimpses. Faces, pale, two wide eyes, mouths open in expressions that might have been screaming or laughing, he couldn't tell. His speedometer, 70, 75, 80. Mile marker 53, 54, 55. The voices in his radio multiplied, dozens, hundreds, all speaking at once. Turn around, turn around, turn around, turn around. Join us, everyone joins us eventually. Your truck is already stopped, Michael. Can't you feel it? You're already stopped. Mile marker 63. Everything stopped. The radio went dead, truly dead this time. The children's singing ceased. The shapes vanished. The temperature returned to normal. Michael's headlights steadied. He was through. Whatever that was, whatever had been happening, he was through it. His phone regained signal, a text from his wife sent an hour ago. Drive safe, love you. Michael pulled over at the next rest area, 20 miles down the road, and sat in his truck for 45 minutes shaking. He called his wife, told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Did you look up those names, the drivers the radio mentioned? Michael hadn't. He'd been too terrified, too focused on just getting through it. But later that day at a motel in Albuquerque, he did. Raymond Beck disappeared July 14, 1983, Highway 54, New Mexico. Patricia Yee disappeared March 8, 1991, same location. 3 more names, 3 more dates, all real, all documented, all missing person cases that never were solved. Michael still drives long haul, but he rerouted his regular runs. He doesn't take Highway 54 anymore. Not at night, not ever. Because sometimes, late at night, when he's scanning radio stations in other empty places, he catches fragments, just for a second, that same big band music, that same warm professional voice. Stay safe, stay alert, and remember, he always changes the station before the DJ can finish that sentence, because he knows what comes next, and he doesn't want to hear it again. He doesn't want to be reminded that on the loneliest roads, in the darkest hours, you're never quite as alone as you think you are.
Sarah Brennan made a simple mistake, the kind of mistake any driver could make. She trusted her GPS. It was November 2021. Sarah was hauling furniture from Atlanta to Nashville, a straightforward 6-hour run she'd done probably 50 times before. But that night, there was construction on I-24. Traffic was backed up for miles. Her delivery window was tight. So when her GPS offered an alternate route, a state highway that would shave 40 minutes off her time, Sarah took it. She shouldn't have. The highway was older, narrower, the kind that probably saw decent traffic during the day, but turned into a ghost road after dark. 2 lanes cutting through dense forest, no streetlights, no houses visible from the road. Sarah had been driving for 3 hours straight. Her eyes were starting to burn. She needed to stop, just for 20 minutes, close her eyes, reset. That's when she saw the sign. Rest area, 2 miles. Perfect timing. Sarah took the exit. The access road was in bad shape. Potholes, cracked asphalt, trees pressing in on both sides, branches scraping the top of her trailer as she drove. After about half a mile, the road opened into a parking area. Sarah sat in her cab for a moment, looking around. It was off. The whole place felt off. There was a cinder block restroom building, stained and weathered, a few picnic tables, rotting wood, 1 sodium light pole, but the light was out. The only illumination came from her own headlights and the faint glow of a clouded moon. But that wasn't what made Sarah's skin crawl. There were other trucks there. 7 of them, all parked in a neat row along the far side of the lot, all older models, 80s, maybe early 90s, and they were pristine. Not a spot of dirt, not a scratch, like they'd just rolled off the factory floor decades ago and been frozen in time. No lights on inside any of the cabs, no sounds of generators or idling engines, just silence. Sarah checked her phone. 11:43 p.m. No signal, not even one bar. She grabbed her flashlight and climbed down from her cab, walking it behind her. The air felt thick, heavy, like humidity, but it was November in Tennessee. It should have been cold and dry. Sarah walked toward the restroom building, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As she passed the row of trucks, she couldn't help glancing up at the cabs. Empty. All of them. No sleeping bags, no personal items, nothing that suggested anyone had ever used them. Where were the drivers? Sarah reached the restroom and pushed open the door. It creaked loudly, that horror movie creak that makes you want to turn around and leave. Inside, 3 stalls, 2 sinks, graffiti-covered walls. It smelled like mildew and rust. One fluorescent light flickered overhead, struggling to stay on. Sarah used the facilities quickly, keeping her ears open for any sound from outside. Nothing, just that oppressive silence. She washed her hands. The water ran brown for several seconds before clearing. The mirror above the sink was cracked, covered in water stains. And in that mirror, for just a fraction of a second, Sarah saw something that made her freeze. A figure, standing in the doorway behind her, not moving, just standing there. Sarah spun around. The doorway was empty. She stared at the open door, at the darkness beyond. Her heart was slamming against her ribs. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice sounded too loud in the small space. No response. Sarah left the restroom and headed straight back to her truck. Forget resting. Forget the 20-minute nap. She'd drive tired. She'd pull over at a well-lit truck stop on the interstate, anywhere but here. She was halfway to her cab when she noticed something that stopped her cold. The 7 trucks, the ones that had been parked along the far side of the lot, they weren't parked the same way anymore. When Sarah had arrived, they'd all been facing forward, parked in a row, all pointing toward the exit, standard parking. Now they were facing inward, toward the center of the lot, toward her truck. All 7 of them had moved, silently, while she was in the restroom, and they'd repositioned themselves in a perfect circle, all pointing at her truck like the spokes of a wheel. Sarah's flashlight beam swept across them. Still no one in the cabs, still no sound, just 7 trucks that had moved on their own. She ran. Her boots pounded against the gravel as she sprinted to her cab. Her hands shook as she jammed the key into the lock. She threw herself inside and slammed the door, hitting the locks immediately. The engine turned over once, twice. Come on, come on. The engine caught and roared to life. Sarah threw the truck into gear and accelerated toward the exit. Her headlights swept across the circle of trucks as she passed them. And that's when she saw the drivers. They were in the cabs now, all 7 trucks, a figure sitting in each driver's seat. They weren't moving, just sitting there, hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheels, heads turned, watching her leave. Sarah didn't slow down, didn't look back. She hit the access road doing 40 and didn't ease off until she was back on the state highway. 2 miles down the road, she pulled into a gas station, lights on, other vehicles present, real people moving around. She sat in the parking lot with her engine running and her doors locked, trying to slow her heart rate. When she finally felt calm enough to move, she went inside and asked the clerk about the rest area. "Rest area? On Route 46? The clerk said. Sarah nodded. The clerk frowned. "There's no rest area on 46. Not anymore. They closed it back in '94. Been abandoned for almost 30 years. "That's impossible," Sarah said. "I was just there. There were trucks. There were—" The clerk interrupted. "Where exactly?" Sarah described the location, the mile marker, the access road. The clerk's expression changed, got darker. "Lady, you need to stay away from there. We don't talk about that place. But I'll tell you this. People who stop there, sometimes they don't leave." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. The clerk just shook his head. "It means you're lucky you got out, and you shouldn't go back."
Sarah drove straight through to Nashville. She delivered her furniture. She filed her delivery report. But 3 days later, when she was back home in Atlanta, she got a call from the Tennessee Department of Transportation. They were following up on a report. An highway officer had found something in an abandoned rest area on Route 46. A truck, older model, 90s Freightliner, parked in a circle with 7 other trucks, all facing inward. The truck was registered to a driver named Kenneth Voss, missing since 2003. The truck had been part of an unsolved disappearance, one of dozens over the years from that same location. But here's what made the officer call Sarah specifically. There were fresh tire tracks in the gravel, leading up to the circle of trucks and then back out again. Tracks that matched the specifications of Sarah's truck exactly. And on the hood of Kenneth Voss's truck, the one that had been sitting there untouched for 18 years, there was a mark, a single handprint, fresh, like someone had leaned against it. Someone, or something. Sarah changed her route after that. She doesn't take state highways anymore, only interstates, only well-traveled roads with plenty of lights and plenty of witnesses. Because she learned something that night that most people never have to learn. Some places aren't just abandoned. Some places are waiting for someone to stop, someone to notice, someone to step into a space that exists just slightly outside the normal flow of time. And once you've been to one of those places, once you've seen what's waiting there, you can never be completely sure that you really left.
Every driver knows the rule. You don't pick up hitchhikers. Not anymore. Not in this world. Too many horror stories. Too many cautionary tales. But sometimes the situation forces your hand. Sometimes basic human decency overrides common sense. And sometimes that decision reveals that the real danger wasn't what you were afraid of. This happened in March 2023. A driver named Robert Chen was running a late-night haul through northern Montana, Missoula to Great Falls, a route that cuts through some of the most isolated territory in the continental United States. It was 1:30 in the morning. A storm had rolled in. Heavy rain, occasional bursts of hail, visibility down to maybe 50 feet. Robert was doing 40 in a 55 zone, white-knuckling it, just trying to keep his rig on the road. That's when his headlights caught something on the shoulder. A person, small, hunched over, walking along the side of the highway in the pouring rain. Robert's first instinct was to keep driving. He'd followed the no hitchhikers rule for 15 years without exception. But as his truck passed, he caught a detail in his side mirror that changed everything. It was a kid, maybe 10 or 11 years old, soaked to the bone, no coat, just a t-shirt and jeans. Robert's chest tightened. A kid, out here, in this weather, in the middle of nowhere at 1:30 a.m. He pulled over. Robert grabbed his phone, no signal, of course, and climbed down from the cab. The rain hit him like a wall. Cold, driving. He had to shout to be heard over the storm. "Hey, kid, you okay?" The figure turned toward him. A boy, maybe 11, dripping wet, shivering. His face was pale, lips almost blue. "I need a ride," the boy said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Where are your parents? Where did you come from?" "I need a ride to Great Falls." Something about the way he said it, so direct, so devoid of fear or confusion, made Robert hesitate. But the kid was clearly in distress. Hypothermia was a real risk out here. "Okay, come on, let's get you warm." Robert helped the boy into the passenger seat and cranked the heat to maximum. He grabbed a blanket from his sleeper berth and wrapped it around the kid's shoulders. "What's your name?" Robert asked, pulling back onto the highway. "Thomas." "Thomas, where do you live? We need to call your parents." "I don't have a phone." "That's okay. I'll call them.
What's your home number?" "I don't remember." Robert glanced at the boy. He was staring straight ahead, not looking at Robert, not looking at anything really, just staring. "Okay, well, we'll figure it out when we get to Great Falls. There's a hospital there. They'll help us find your family." Thomas didn't respond. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Robert kept stealing glances at his passenger. The boy hadn't moved, hadn't adjusted his position or touched the blanket or done any of the small fidgeting movements people do naturally. He just sat, perfectly still, staring forward. "Thomas, can you tell me what happened? How did you end up out there?" The boy didn't answer for a long moment. Then, "I was in an accident." "An accident? When? Tonight?" "A long time ago." Robert frowned. "What do you mean, a long time ago?" "We were driving to Great Falls, my mom and my sister and me. There was a storm, just like this one. The road was wet. We went off the road." Robert felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "Thomas, when did this happen?" "February 12th, 1997. Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. 1997. This kid wasn't even born in 1997. "Thomas, what year do you think it is?" The boy turned his head slowly. For the first time since getting in the truck, he looked directly at Robert. His eyes were wrong, too dark, too empty, like looking into two bottomless holes. "It's 1997, Thomas said. "We're going to Great Falls. We never made it before, but this time we will." Robert felt his blood turn to ice. He wanted to pull over, wanted to tell this kid to get out, but they were in the middle of nowhere, in a storm, miles from any town. And besides, what if he was wrong? What if this was just a traumatized kid, confused, hypothermic, saying things that didn't make sense? Robert's phone chimed. Signal had returned. He grabbed it with one hand, keeping his eyes on the road. A text from an unknown number. "Pull over, get him out, now." Robert stared at the screen, then at Thomas. The boy was still looking at him, still wearing that empty expression. Another text. "He's not what he appears. Pull over before you reach mile marker 47. Robert's heart rate spiked. "Thomas, I need to pull over for a second. Check something with the truck." "No," Thomas said. His voice had changed, deeper, layered. "Keep driving. We're almost there." "I almost where?" "Mile marker 47. The text had specifically warned him about mile marker 47. Robert checked his GPS, 2 miles ahead. "What happens at mile marker 47, Thomas?" The boy smiled, and it was the most horrible thing he'd ever seen. "That's where we went off the road. That's where it happened. And every year on this date, at this time, in this weather, I come back. I find a driver, and I make sure they take me there. Because I'm not the one in danger, Robert." Robert's eyes widened. He looked at his GPS. 1 mile to marker 47. "You are." Thomas reached for the steering wheel. Robert fought him off, one hand pushing the boy away, the other desperately holding the wheel steady. But Thomas was stronger than any 11-year-old should be. His hands locked onto the wheel with impossible force. "We go off the road here," Thomas said, his voice now definitely multiple voices speaking in unison. "Everyone does. Everyone who picks me up. That's how it works. That's how I get more company, more drivers to keep me company on the side of the road, forever." Robert did the only thing he could think of. He slammed on the brakes. The truck slowed violently, jerking forward. Thomas lost his grip on the steering wheel. Robert grabbed him, and his hands passed through nothing. The empty seat, in the passenger seat. No boy, no blanket, no sign that anyone had ever sat there. Robert sat in the middle of the highway, hazards flashing, staring at the empty seat. He reached out and touched it. Dry, completely dry, like no one soaked wet had ever sat there. Robert climbed down and walked to the side of the road. Rain pounded him as he searched the ground with his flashlight.
Mile marker 47 was 10 feet ahead, and just beyond it, down an embankment barely visible in the darkness, there was something. Wreckage. Old wreckage. A car. Rusted. Overtaken by vegetation, but still recognizable. Robert slid down the embankment, rain blinding him, and approached the wreck. It was a sedan, 90s model. The front end was completely crushed, the windshield shattered. And on the dashboard, preserved somehow against time and weather, there was a photo, water damaged but still visible. A woman, a girl, maybe 16, and a boy. The boy looked exactly like Thomas. Robert pulled out his phone. Signal was back. He searched for accidents on this stretch of highway. February 12th, 1997. 3 fatalities. Christina Mercer, age 34, Melissa Mercer, age 16, Thomas Mercer, age 11. Vehicle left the road during a severe storm. No other vehicles involved. Cause of accident? Unknown. Robert climbed back up to his truck. He sat in the cab for 20 minutes, shaking, before he could bring himself to continue driving. When he finally reached Great Falls, he went straight to a police station. He told them everything, showed them the photos he'd taken of the wreckage, the GPS coordinates, the texts on his phone. The officer who took his statement listened without interrupting. When Robert finished, the officer was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Chen," he finally said, "you're the 4th driver to report this exact experience. Same stretch of road, same date, same storm conditions, same boy. Every year on February 12th, when there's a storm, someone reports picking up a boy named Thomas, and every year someone almost goes off the road at mile marker 47. Robert felt his stomach drop. What about the texts, the warnings? The officer pulled up something on his computer, turned the monitor toward Robert. Those texts came from this number. Recognize it? Robert stared at the screen. It was a Montana number, a 406 area code. But what made his blood run cold was the name attached to the account. Thomas Mercer. The account had been active since 1997, the month before the accident. "We don't understand it," Keithley said quietly. "The account shouldn't still exist. The phone company has no record of ongoing service, but every February 12th, during a storm, that number sends out texts, warning drivers, trying to prevent what happened to Thomas from happening to others." "So what? Thomas is trying to kill people but also trying to save them?" Robert asked. The officer shook his head. "We think there might be 2 versions of Thomas out there. The one who died in the accident and the one who's trying to prevent more accidents. Both trapped on the same stretch of road, both existing at the same time, forever." Robert never drove through Montana again. He rerouted all his runs to avoid that entire state. But every February 12th, regardless of where he is or what he's doing, his phone receives a text from that same unknown number. Just 3 words. "Thank you for listening." And Robert wonders, every single year, which Thomas sent that message? The one who tried to kill him, or the one who saved his life? He's never been sure, and he hopes
3 stories, 3 drivers, 3 experiences that defy rational explanation. Michael still hears that radio station sometimes, late at night, bleeding through static on empty frequencies. Sarah never stops at rest areas she doesn't recognize, even in broad daylight. And Robert carries those texts on his phone like a talisman, a reminder that salvation and damnation can sometimes wear the same face. What connects these stories isn't just the fear they provoke, it's something deeper. Something about the nature of those spaces between destinations, those liminal zones where normal rules don't quite apply. Highways are strange places. They exist for one purpose, to move us from here to there. They're not meant to be destinations themselves. They're passages, transitional spaces. And throughout human history, transitional spaces have always been considered thin places, places where the barrier between our world and something else grows permeable. The drivers who experience these things, they're not crazy, they're not hallucinating. They're just spending more time in those thin places than the rest of us. More time in the darkness between cities, more time alone with nothing but their thoughts and the endless white line disappearing beneath their wheels. And in that isolation, in that darkness, they sometimes encounter the things that exist in the gaps, the things that wait in the spaces we normally pass through too quickly to notice. There are 2 million miles of highway in America, millions of trucks rolling across them every single night. And if you talk to enough drivers, really talk to them, late at night when they're willing to share the stories that usually keep to themselves, you'll find that these experiences aren't rare. They're just rarely discussed. Because what do you say? How do you explain to someone who's never driven through 3 a.m. in the Nevada desert, or the Wyoming darkness, or the empty heart of Montana during a February storm? How do you explain that the world is bigger and stranger than we pretend it is? You can't. So they don't try. They just keep driving, keep logging their miles, keep doing the job that keeps this country running, and they keep their stories to themselves. But now, you know. Now you've heard what they've experienced. And the next time you're driving late at night and you see a semi-truck passing you in the darkness, their cab illuminated by the green glow of their dashboard instruments, remember that the person in that cab has probably seen things you can't imagine, has been places you don't want to go, has encountered something on those lonely roads that changed them forever. And maybe, just maybe, they're still encountering it. Every single night. Because the road is long, and the darkness is patient, and some things that wait in that darkness have been waiting for a very, very long time. Drive safe out there, and if you ever find yourself on an empty highway at 3 a.m. and your radio picks up a station that shouldn't exist, or you see a rest area you don't remember from previous trips, or someone small and soaked appears in your headlights on a rainy night, just keep driving. Don't stop. Don't engage. Just keep driving toward the light.